Hey, welcome back. I am so glad that you're here. You're joining me, and this journey has been awesome for me, and I hope that you are enjoying it as much as I am. This is the Reflections podcast where we reflect on the writings of the fathers of the faith. This week, we will be engaging with the little flowers of Saint Francis. So, Saint Francis of Assisi. This text, compiled around the mid 1400s, has offered a little glimpse into the lives of Saint Francis and his brothers, showcasing their devotion, humility, and often their extraordinary experiences. We're not just looking at a historical document, though. We are encountering a tapestry of spiritual lessons, which is what this podcast is all about. We will be engaging with the narratives that are sometimes humorous, sometimes miraculous, but always deeply human, connected to God. In this podcast episode, some of the key themes and stories found in Little Flowers are the foundational relationship between St. Francis and his very first companion, Brother Bernard, including how Bernard was converted. There is an emphasis on the importance of humility as shown through the interactions of St. Francis with brothers like Maceo and Leo, and an emphasis on poverty as a core value for Francis and his followers. There is a presence of miraculous events, including encounters with angels, divine visitors, and even the famous story of St. Francis and the Wolf of Gubbio. Hopefully I said that right. The conversion stories and the ways the brothers were inspired to follow St. Francis are also included, and there are many examples of devotion and service demonstrated by various brothers in relationship with St. Francis. And interestingly, there is a profound experience of St. Francis receiving stigmata, including the mysterious words spoken by a seraph to him. The Little Flowers isn't just a collection of biographies. It is a window into the unique spiritual movement that emphasized a radical commitment to the gospel and sought to emulate the life of Christ through acts of charity, devotion, and radical simplicity. Let's listen in to this week's conversation exploring those profound and powerful stories, drawing out the timeless lesson they offer us today.
Welcome to the Reflections Podcast. We're the place where we reflect on the writings of the fathers of the faith.
That's right.
And today we're taking a deep dive into a really beloved collection, Francis of Assisi, The Little Flowers.
Ah, yes. It's fascinating because, it was compiled later in the 14th century, but it gives us this amazing window.
Right, into St. Francis himself and his very first followers back in the 13th century.
It really does, and it really shows just how huge his impact was on Christian history. It's quite something.
It really is. And I think what makes The Little Flowers so engaging is that it's not just a dry historical rundown.
No, not at all. It's this vibrant mix of anecdotes, stories.
Exactly. And they're specifically chosen, aren't they, to show the virtues, the miracles, all connected to St. Francis and his early companions.
Yeah, think of them almost like living parables. They're illustrating these deep truths. Now, whether every single tiny detail is historically spot on, well, scholars might debate that.
Sure. But that's almost beside the point, isn't it?
I think so. The core messages about, faith, real humility, the essence of a spiritual life, those just shine through. They still speak to us today really powerfully.
Absolutely. And The Little Flowers, it covers so much ground. You've got the famous stories like Francis talking to animals.
Preaching to the birds, yes. Classic.
But also these accounts of like divine visions and even the struggles the early order faced. It wasn't all smooth sailing.
No, definitely not. So where should we start? Maybe with one of the key figures right at the beginning.
Sounds good. Let's talk about Brother Bernard. he's quite significant.
Oh, absolutely. He holds this really special place, doesn't he? As the very first companion to actually join St. Francis.
The first one. And the stories about how he came to join are, well, they tell you a lot about seeing faith lived out.
They really do. You get this picture of St. Francis testing Bernard's sincerity almost.
Yeah, it describes Francis getting up multiple nights to pray, just saying, my God, over and over with this incredible intensity.
And Bernard's watching this, right? Just observing this profound devotion.
Exactly. And seeing that raw piety it moved him deeply.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it? How seeing faith lived authentically can just completely change someone.
Totally. And Bernard, I mean, this wasn't just anyone. He was a very wealthy man.
That's a key point. He had considerable wealth, and seeing Francis's devotion inspired him to make this, well, pretty radical decision.
To give it all up, renounce everything.
And the text emphasizes the joy he felt doing it. That's important too.
Yes. Distributing his wealth, huge amounts to the poor, widows, orphans, prisoners, even religious institutions. A complete detachment.
It's a strong message, isn't it, about how letting go of material things can perhaps open you up spiritually.
Definitely. And tied into Bernard's story is Sylvester. He joined too, but his motivation was a bit different.
Right. Sylvester had that incredible vision.
Yes. He saw this golden cross coming right out of St. Francis's mouth.
Reaching up to heaven, arms stretching east and west. Quite an image.
It really is. And that vision just convinced him. He saw Francis's divine mission, basically.
So he also joyfully gave away all his possessions and joined the Friars Minor.
Became part of that early Franciscan movement, committed to poverty and service. Which brings us to this interesting dynamic of obedience and divine will.
Ah, yes. That comes up quite a bit in these stories. It's not always straightforward.
No, it's more like true obedience sometimes looks different from just following orders to the letter.
Exactly. Like that story where Francis asks Brother Bernard to speak to a blind man.
Right. And Bernard doesn't respond right away. Why? Because he's completely lost in prayer.
The text says his mind was suspended above the earth, utterly focused on God.
So deep in contemplation. And even Francis, seeing this, he hesitates.
Which is fascinating in itself. Francis respects Bernard's holiness so much.
He's actually worried that if he stays, he might have to, correct Bernard somehow.
Yeah, and he feels that would be wrong, given Bernard's obvious connection to God. But at the same time...
He really wants to hear Bernard speak about God.
Mm-hmm.
It shows this incredible respect.
It really does. It suggests maybe that deep spirituality has its own kind of responsiveness, its own logic almost.
And that level of discernment in the early community.
Yeah.
Wow. Then there's that encounter with the angel. That's quite revealing, too.
Oh, definitely. Especially the contrast with Brother Elias.
Right. Elias had apparently been quite haughty towards his angel.
So the same angel then appears to Bernard, asking a really simple question: how to cross a river.
And Bernard's hesitant at first, right? The water looks deep.
He pauses, but the angel reveals his name, Marvelous, and then, whoosh, helps him cross instantly.
It's a great story.
It really highlights a few things, doesn't it? The humility of Bernard versus Elias's pride, for one.
Yeah.
And also that, even very holy people can feel fear or doubt, but divine help is there.
And the name Marvelous, it just hints at that grace, that wonder. So thinking about these early stories, what do they tell us about humility and what they saw as true treasure?
Well, there's some really good examples. Remember when Francis sends Bernard to Bologna?
To start a new house for the order? Yeah. That's a big deal.
It shows immense trust from Francis. And then in Bologna, Bernard meets this learned man.
Oh, right. And Bernard just shows him the rule of St. Francis.
Just presents the rule. And this scholar is completely blown away by its perfection.
Says Bernard and his companions are the holiest people he's ever met.
It really shows the impact the Franciscans had right from the start. People saw something radical and deeply spiritual.
Absolutely. And Francis's respect for Bernard just keeps showing. Like when Francis is nearing death.
He blesses Bernard and appoints him as his vicar, his representative.
That's huge. It underlines just how highly Francis regarded Bernard's sanctity.
Then you have the story of Francis's Lenten retreat, that famous one on the island in Lake Perugia.
The 40-day fast. It's clearly meant to echo Christ's time in the wilderness, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a deliberate parallel. His complete withdrawal, that intense focus, it's pure asceticism.
And living on just half a small loaf of bread for 40 days and nights.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
It really emphasizes his dedication to that ascetic, contemplative path, which leads us nicely into that idea of perfect joy.
Right, and obedience, too. Especially in how Francis teaches Brother Leo.
That lesson on perfect joy is so central to Francis's whole outlook, I think.
It really is. He basically says, look, perfect joy isn't about success or praise or miracles.
No, none of the external stuff. It's about the inner peace you find when you endure hardship, suffering, rejection, for the love of Christ.
It's a total flipping of the script on what joy means, isn't it?
Completely. It's all about inner resilience, spiritual focus, not external circumstances.
Which is pretty radical, and the dynamic between them on obedience.
Yeah, that's fascinating too.
Where Francis keeps telling Leo to say he's not worthy of God's mercy.
Yeah. Command after command, say you're unworthy.
But Leo just can't do it every time. He bursts out with these affirmations of God's incredible grace and mercy.
So it looks like disobedience on the surface.
But Francis seems to recognize it as something else, like Leo is being compelled by a deeper divine inspiration. Right. It suggests that maybe true obedience, in some cases, means tuning into that higher spiritual truth, even if it seems to contradict a direct human command.
It definitely raises interesting questions about spiritual authority and individual conscience, doesn't it?
It really does. So how was this movement perceived? Let's talk about recognition and how Francis saw it all relating to God's glory.
Well, that story with Brother Maceo is very telling.
Where Maceo asks him, almost mockingly, why does the whole world seem to be following you?
Yeah, like, what's so special about you? And Francis's answer is just pure humility.
This is for the confusion of the world and for the glory of God.
Exactly. He acknowledges the impact, but completely deflects the praise. It's all God's work, confusing worldly expectations.
He saw himself purely as an instrument. And didn't Francis also, know what Maceo was thinking?
Yes, the text mentions Francis discerning his thoughts, which again points to that deep spiritual insight, possibly divinely given.
And there's that other time Francis deliberately humbles Maceo, giving him menial tasks.
Right, like being the porter and cook, but then he relents when the other brothers plead for Maceo.
So there's discipline, but also compassion. A balance.
Absolutely. And that theme of poverty, trusting God will provide, that's just woven into the fabric of the little flowers.
Oh, definitely. That image of Francis and Maceo putting the bread they begged by the fountain.
And Francis just erupts in praise of Lady Poverty. It's so vivid.
Leading to that incredible moment, the appearance of St. Peter and St. Paul.
Wow. Yeah, talk about divine validation for their path of poverty and total reliance on God.
It's like saying, by emptying yourselves of material things, you make space for these profound spiritual encounters.
That seems to be the message. And we also see Francis in these moments of just intense spiritual ecstasy.
Like when he's traveling with Maceo and starts crying out, ah, ah.
And apparently lifts Maceo into the air just with his breath. It's this picture of almost uncontrollable divine energy overflowing.
Intense communion, yeah. Which leads to thinking about moments where the divine presence was felt tangibly by the whole group.
Right. You mean the story where Christ appears?
Yes. Well, Francis and the brothers are talking about him, and there's this miraculous fire.
But it's not a consuming fire, is it? It's described as non-material.
Right, symbolizing the fire of divine love, filling the space, filling their hearts.
It's a beautiful image of Christ being present when followers gather in his name, their hearts aligned.
Just lovely. And Francis's influence, of course, went way beyond that core group. It led to the Third Order eventually.
Right, and that push towards wider preaching came after advice from St. Clare and Brother Sylvester.
They urged him to preach for the conversion of many. And his audience wasn't always human.
No. The preaching to the birds, probably the most famous story of all.
It really is. How they all gathered, listened silently, and then he blessed them.
It just perfectly captures his connection to all of creation, that sense of universal kinship under God. It's such an inspiring vision.
Totally. And The Little Flowers doesn't shy away from accounts of, pretty extraordinary visions either.
No, like the young boy brother who sees Christ, Mary, and saints talking with Francis during his night prayers.
I mean, that's quite something. It really underlines the kind of spiritual intensity surrounding Francis and his close circle.
It definitely paints a picture of a time and place where the veil between earth and heaven felt perhaps remarkably thin for those deeply devoted.
Yeah, and the scale of the movement becomes clear with the story of the great chapter.
At St. Mary at the Angels, yeah. Over 5,000 brothers gathered.
Just imagine that, 5,000. And the visiting cardinal being so impressed by their orderliness, their devotion.
It really says a lot about the spirit Francis instilled. And then there's the miracle of provision.
Right. Food and supplies appearing for that huge crowd.
With knights and barons humbling themselves to serve the friars. It shows the immense respect the order had gained.
Amazing. The collection also touches on something maybe less talked about, the value of sickness, of infirmity.
That's an important point. When Francis himself is ill, he hears that voice from heaven,
Revealing that his suffering is actually gaining him this immense eternal treasure.
It completely reframes it, doesn't it? Suffering isn't just hardship. It can be a path to deeper spiritual reward.
It's a perspective that looks beyond the immediate pain towards something eternal, a real comfort, potentially.
Definitely. And of course, you can't talk about the little flowers without mentioning the miracles of healing and compassion.
Oh, absolutely. The Wolf of Gubbio, that's got to be one of the most famous animal stories ever.
It really is. Francis taming the wolf, not through force, but through, well, the power of the cross and this compassionate agreement.
It's like an allegory for redemption, isn't it?
Yeah.
The power of love to transform even what seems dangerous or lost.
Beautifully put. And then the healing of the leper.
Which really highlights Francis's hands-on service to the most marginalized that was so core to his mission.
Embracing those society shunned and teaching patience through suffering at the same time.
And remember the story about the robbers, when the guardian drives them away harshly.
Yes. And Francis gently corrects him, saying basically, that's not how we do it.
Then he has food sent to them, treats them with compassion.
And it leads to their genuine remorse. It's a lesson in the power of kindness to actually bring about repentance far more than harshness can.
Such wisdom there. Then there are those visions of the afterlife.
Yeah.
They're pretty intense.
Oh, yeah. The brother being led through those terrifying trials.
Falling, the fiery furnace, that incredibly narrow bridge.
It's stark stuff. Clear warnings about the consequences of sin, but also stressing the absolute need for divine guidance to navigate it all.
Powerful, memorable allegories about living virtuously and relying on God's mercy.
Definitely designed to make an impact. And then, arguably, the pinnacle event in Francis's life is presented here.
The stigmata on Mount Alvernia.
That awe-inspiring vision of the seraph and the actual imprint of Christ's wounds appearing on Francis's body.
Is portrayed as this incredible sign of divine favor, uniting him so intimately with Christ's suffering.
Just extraordinary. And the little details add to it, the fragrant scent, the intense pain he endured.
And his humility even then, trying to conceal the wounds.
It adds a very human layer to this profoundly miraculous event. And we shouldn't forget the other companions mentioned.
Right, like Brother Juniper. He's such a character.
Oh, Juniper. His extreme simplicity, his sometimes rather misguided zeal.
Like giving away the altar bells.
Yeah.
Or cooking that inedible meal for weeks.
Exactly, but always with good intentions. And his joyful acceptance when corrected. It's kind of endearing, isn't it?
It really is. He embodies this radical, almost childlike trust and commitment to poverty.
And then you have Brother Giles, sort of a contrast in some ways.
More the contemplative figure.
Yeah.
But also a big believer in manual labor.
Yes, stressing the importance of work and his emphasis on obedience, sometimes even over deep prayer.
That really highlights that practical, integrated spirituality the Franciscans aimed for. Service and contemplation together.
And that lovely story of King Louis of France visiting him, and they just sit in silence.
Communicating purely through spiritual understanding. No words needed. Beautiful.
It really shows the depth of his inner life.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the little flowers, what are the big takeaways, the main themes that really resonate from these reflections?
Well, again and again, you see the importance of humility, real deep humility. And obedience, not just blind rule following, but listening for God's will.
Right, and valuing poverty, even embracing suffering as paths to spiritual growth.
Definitely. And the power of faith, the power of prayer. It's shown as being incredibly active in their daily lives, plus that constant sense of the divine being present right there with them.
Yeah, it feels very tangible. And even though these stories come from, centuries ago, a specific time and place.
The core lessons still hit home, don't they? About inner virtue, our relationship with God, how we treat others and the world around us, still so relevant.
Absolutely. Which brings us to a final thought maybe for you listening.
How do these ancient stories, these examples of really radical devotion, profound simplicity, how do they challenge you? Or maybe affirm your own understanding of faith, of trying to live a meaningful life today?
It's definitely something to chew on. We really hope you'll explore Francis of Assisi, the little flowers yourself if you haven't already.
Yeah, it's just such a rich source of inspiration. Really gets you thinking about Christian spirituality in a deep way.
And our journey through the writings of the Fathers of the Faith doesn't stop here.
No, we'll be back soon. Please join us next time as we reflect on another key text from our shared tradition.
So are you inspired? Will you pick up a copy of Little Flowers for yourself? Maybe you've already read. Then do you agree with our reflection? Did any little flowers bloom in your heart? Let me know. I am praying that this podcast will draw you into a closer relationship with Christ and that little flowers will bloom all around you. Join us next week on Reflection Podcast, where we reflect on the writings of the Fathers of the Faith. We will be reflecting on more St. Francis.